It's time for your favorite show, Fluent and Chill. I'm Fluent, Anthony K from the Sports Fluent podcast, and I'm here every week with my man Jermaine from Chilltown Hoops. Jermaine, man, how you doing?
Yo.
I love this episode. One, it's NBA edition.
Mm-hmm.
For those that don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Two, we're talking about the 80s.
Uh-oh.
And I know that we're going to talk basketball, but I'm thinking like Michael Jackson. I'm thinking like Back to the Future. I'm thinking like Rocky III. Like I'm thinking stuff that I remember from the 80s.
Drago.
Right? Like, Drago, bad hair, girls wearing way too many bracelets. Like I'm getting this flashback of stuff. So I'm excited about that. I'm also excited because we got our first glimpse into some NBA, kind of what the teams are going to look like, some press conferences. We heard some people say some interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
I heard some people say some things that made me actually smile. It made me happy.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to get into that. But like I said, and oh, did I forget? We're gonna talk about a certain division in the West.
Mm-hmm.
There's a team in that division that I like a little bit, named the Los Angeles Lakers. We're going to talk about them. So let's start, and we've gone through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And we talked about a lot of great players back then. But there's something about the 80s that maybe, you and I were there. For those that weren't, the NBA wasn't in a good place coming out of the 70s.
No,
although there might have been some good players or great players.
Mm-hmm.
The league itself, the association, was kind of struggling, and they needed something to inject some life into them.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, did they get a double dose? They got both vaccines in one dose.
Not one, but two.
Right?
You got two shots.
You got two. So here are these two guys who probably couldn't be more different, right? You got Magic Johnson, who is a distributor, I don't want to say fancy, but listen, when I first saw Magic play, right, and that's how I became a Laker fan. I literally was like, this dude's a magician. Like, he's got eyes in the back of his head. Like, I don't know how he's doing this. So you have this guy from Michigan State, and he plays a certain way. He gets drafted to the West Coast, Hollywood, Los Angeles. Then you get another guy from French Lick who, listen, I know we talk about this and I don't necessarily agree with it, but wasn't athletic, wasn't your prototypical, what you would think to be a superstar basketball player who just went out.
Can't run, can't jump. I mean, what is this dude even doing out here? What's the story?
If you saw him on the street, you'd be like, that's just a farm boy from French Lick. And they start this rivalry in college. And boom, the NBA gets a shot. So let's start there, because we're going to talk about some other people too. But let's start there. What's that first impression looking back now on that Magic Bird, what they did for the NBA? Not just what they did for their teams or themselves, obviously.
Well, we'll start with, Tone, don't understate the position that the league was in. I mean, the finals was on tape delay. I mean, that's where we were during that time. I mean, the finals was we already found the winner had already won the championship at 9:00, and the game was on at midnight. So that's what was going on. I mean, the Boston Celtics, win the NBA championship in 1981, and they're flying commercial, and we gotta sit in Boston. We gotta sit in Atlanta with the NBA trophy in our hands, waiting to catch a connecting flight because we couldn't get a flight straight from Houston to Boston. I mean, that sounds ridiculous today, but that's what was going on back then. The league had just come out of it was drug infested. It was guys who were just deemed as making a ridiculous amount of money, but didn't really care about the game. It was a very selfish era from what people thought it was. And there wasn't really a team aspect in it. And it just wasn't fun to watch. Now, enter Magic Johnson. Enter a guy who looks like us, who looks like me, who's from where I'm from. He's he's a blue collar. He comes from a blue collar family, comes from a huge family. 9 brothers and sisters. Father is an industrial worker. You know, his mother was a cook. So he comes from where we come from. So I can relate to this guy. And then you got a guy like Larry Bird, who also comes from where I'm from. Only difference is Magic goes to Hollywood. So he's deemed as Hollywood and completely forget that he's not Hollywood. Magic is, in fact, blue collar. So these guys come along, and it was the perfect storm. And please do not underestimate the racial aspect of it. You know, you got a white guy who was really good going to Boston, and he looked like these people. And Boston was not a fun place to be if you're a black man in the 70s or in the 60s or even in the 80s. It was not a fun place to be. So then you bring Larry Bird in here, who is that dude in terms of his play, and that really helps them in terms of their city, bringing in fans, selling out the crowds, because now we got somebody that looks like us. Add that to the fact that you bring Magic in, who's almost deemed as the enemy in some aspects. And
it's interesting. It's interesting because you talk about his background being kind of similar.
Right.
But when he goes to LA, he instantly becomes Hollywood, right? It's the Showtime Lakers. It's
right from the beginning.
Yeah, it's these behind the back, no look passes. It's all this kind of stuff. He embraced that very quickly.
Right. Absolutely. So it was just the perfect combination of those two guys. And then having these guys finally meet in the finals in '84 for the NBA championship, because Magic first comes in and they win the NBA championship. Then the next year, Bird's second year, they win the NBA championship. So now the buzz is, well, when are these guys going to get together? Because not only is it Bird and Magic, it's the Lakers and the Celtics, which it's been for years, right? And we hadn't seen that. So now, when are these guys going to get together? So they get together and they end up playing in basically the most epic NBA finals up until that time, and it goes 7 and the Celtics win. Now the NBA is hot again. Now everybody wants to watch the NBA again, strictly because of these two guys. Now it becomes a big, it's not just a big deal, it becomes a huge deal. And those guys, they were tremendous for the league. They were tremendous for the game.
Look, if you were a conspiracy theorist, you would suggest that this was a script that was written, because how perfect is it that Magic and Bird come in, and in his rookie season, Magic Johnson takes his team. Kareem gets hurt. He goes and plays center. They win the championship. The next year, it was the 1-2 Bird and Magic. Oh well, then Bird takes his team, carries them to a finals. They like. If I would have told you this I was pitching you a script, you'd be like, no, it never works out that way. It never works out that. But it worked out perfectly for them and for the NBA. It's incredible, like how sometimes just being in the right place is just perfect. So you're right. It saved. They saved the NBA.
Yes, they did.
They saved the NBA. So let's jump into, because we want to get to some other players too. So I'm going to go through like we do. We're going to do the all-decade team. Obviously, the first guard is Magic Johnson. So how much more can we say about Magic Johnson? If you're looking at true point guard, he still – I don't see anyone who's even close to passing him at this point. He is the greatest pure true point guard in the history of the NBA. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Absolutely. And not only that, I mean, he revolutionized the position. And we haven't seen anybody like him since. And Magic retired, not the Magic Johnson in 1996. I'm talking about Magic Johnson in 1991. That was Magic Johnson. He retired in 91, and that was 30 years ago. And we haven't seen anybody like him since, and he's still deemed as the best to ever do it. We're talking about a guy who back then at 6'9", you played on the block, Tone. You played down low. You were not the primary ball handler. You were not the primary distributor. And we got this guy who's 6'9", who's a distributor, who's smart, who's heady, who's fast as lightning, and he's just a mismatch nightmare. He's a matchup nightmare, and his ability to distribute the basketball, not just in the open floor, also in traffic, his ability to score. We had never seen anything like that. And the question was, is this the future of basketball? Well, not really, because we haven't seen anything like this, and I don't think we're going to see anything like this. But we've had people who tried to emulate it. Penny Hardaway has tried to do it. Steve Smith, guys like that. But we haven't seen anybody like Magic Johnson who brought what he brought to the game.
6'9", double-digit assists, and did it and didn't just do it, like did it like that you wanted to go watch him do it because he had this element of, I don't want to listen, like the Harlem Globetrotters, like, you know what I mean? Like he'd be kicking up his leg and looking one way and passing that, like he was there to put on a show. When we say Showtime Lakers, for us that watched them, it wasn't just because they were fast paced and it was a show. Like you went and you got your money's worth every time.
Think about this for a second, Tone. He almost, when you think about it, he was almost bigger than the show. Like you came to see him. Like you came to see basketball, but it was almost like he was bigger than, it was almost like he was bigger than the show. You wanted to see him, and him particularly.
Oh yeah. When have you ever seen? Look, I might be missing one or two, but when have you ever gone to an NBA game to watch someone pass? You've gone to see dunks. You've gone, right? Like I remember, in Toronto, going to see Vince Carter to see what kind of crazy dunks he was going to put on.
Right.
People today go to, see how far can Steph consistently hit threes from the logo. When do you go and say, I just want to go watch that guy pass?
I just want to, because I know he's going to do something incredible. I know that he's going to do something.
It's rare. Like Jason Williams, I loved watching him pass, but I don't think we went to watch Sacramento and watch him pass. No. You know what I mean? There were so many other things going on. All right, so Magic's the obvious one. Here's an interesting one that's the second guard. And why I say it's interesting is because when we talk about Michael Jordan, we always think about the 90s because, hey, he dominated the 90s. His Bulls, I should say, dominated the 90s. 6 championships in the 6.5 years that he played in the 90s. And look, you couldn't win more than them because there's only 10 years and they got 6 of them. But people forget his kind of accolades, his rise to dominance, to fame, started in 84. And he came into the NBA like he was shot out of a cannon. You talked about saving the league. Here's an thing that not everybody knows. The Bulls were a horrible franchise. Okay, they called
were Oklahoma City. They were Sacramento. They were Oklahoma City. They were trash. They were Minnesota.
Let me tell you, they weren't that bad because I don't think any of those teams was getting more fans to their indoor soccer league. And that's what was happening to the Bulls. Just think about this. You know how big or how small soccer was in the U.S. in the mid-'80s. In Chicago, the indoor soccer team was playing in the same stadium, Old Chicago Stadium, and they were getting more fans at those games than the Bulls were.
Man, that's incredible.
Just think about that. That's what he came into. Forget all the cocaine, traveling circus. Just forget all that. Not even the outdoor, the indoor soccer team was getting more fans. So he comes in and obviously breathes life into Chicago. And now there's like, hey, Magic and Bird, not that they're old at this point, but here's kind of another, because you need more stars. Now here's another star. He starts winning MVPs, Defensive Player of the Year in the 80s. So he's the second one. If you're not including the 90s, is there a better player? Forget team success for a second, because that is important. But if you take away, was he still the best player in the 80s?
I don't think he was the best player in the 80s, but he was absolutely in the conversation. I mean, a lot of people talk about Jordan and his dominance and winning 6 championships. For those that aren't aware, Michael Jordan's career did not start in 1991. He was in the league 7 years before that. It did not start in 1991. No. He was in the NBA since 1984, and he came in and he was a flash. Bird and Magic, they played on the ground. That's where their game was. Jordan comes in with this aerial attack that we hadn't seen since Dr. J. And then now we have somebody that's exciting, that plays in the air, and who's going to do something that's going to be, this was before Sports Center and the internet, where now it's a buzz about this guy. Add that to the fact that he's got the North Carolina principles, where he's a dog on the defensive side of the ball. Absolutely. Also. So now we got this guy who looks like he's going to become the next great player. But at that point, it was still Magic and Bird. But Jordan was absolutely in the conversation of being a great player during that decade. Absolutely. No question about it.
And let's we have this debate quite a bit. So let's put it out there and put an end to this. Let's not be confused. The Celtics and the Lakers were the 2 most dominant teams of the 80s because they had the best teams. It wasn't just Magic and Bird, right? Bird had McHale and Parrish and DJ and maybe Danny Ainge to a lesser extent, and then off the bench, an injured but still helpful Bill Walton. Like there's players on that team. Magic, right, had Worthy. Magic had Kareem for most of it. Michael Cooper. There was you had the guys that did the dirty work, Kurt Rambis and others. So they were by far the best team. And so I want to give them their due, because listen, next week we're going to talk about the 90s, and trust me, we're going to talk a little bit more about Jordan. So now we move to the forwards. We talked about Larry Bird. One more thing. Any other thing about Larry Bird? Because I think people underestimate two things about Larry Bird: how good he was defensively, and how good of a playmaker he was.
Absolutely.
We talk about the shooting. We talk about the rebounding. He might not have been as flashy as Magic, but I've been behind the backs. He was very court aware.
We're talking about a guy who, I think, with the exception of Chris Webber, he's one of two guys in the history of the NBA to average 20, 10, and 4 for his career. He's one of two guys. I think Chris Webber is the only other guy to do that for their career. And with that being said, we got a guy in Larry Bird who came into the game that was just slow, unathletic, couldn't run. But his basketball IQ was through the roof. And it didn't take long. And he said this coming into the league. He said his first training camp, he recognized, I'm going to be a good player in this league, because he looked at the landscape and saw angles. He saw his ability to play make. And he knew right from the beginning, I'm going to be a good player in this league. Now, did he think that he was going to be first team All-NBA 9 times in 10 years? I don't know if I'll go that far. But he did think he was going to be a good player because I could outsmart guys. So, the notion of Larry Bird being who he is, it shouldn't be a surprise, because we're talking about a guy who was that from day one. I mean, Larry Bird was first team All-NBA as a rookie.
Yeah. And let's not forget, he close to a 50, 40, 90 for his career as well. Like
for his career, Tone, not a season.
Not a season. For his career, he's right there. He's like within a percentage point of 50, 40, 90 career. And now we applaud someone who does it once.
Right.
A career.
It's a huge deal when a guy does it once. Bird was doing that regularly.
And 3 MVPs in a row that probably would have been more if they didn't stop giving it to him, right? Like, people forget how good Larry Bird and Magic, for that matter, they forget how good these guys were. So the next one, listen, this is one of we never talk about him enough, and we really should. And I've brought it up to you before. You and I have talked about it. But the other forward for the All-80s team is Dr. J.
Julius.
I
caught, and you and I are around the same age, I caught Doc on the other side of his prime. So I caught Doc when he was not just on the other side of my prime, but I'm still better than 90% of you guys. I can still play in the air. I'm still great in transition. Doc was a very underrated defender that people don't give him credit for. He was a very underrated defender. Doc was one of the best transition players that I had ever seen. You get a guy out in transition like that with that sort of athleticism. Doc was incredible. He was tough as nails. His aerial assault that's why Jordan became what Jordan was, because what Jordan did was he enhanced who Doc was.
Yep.
That's all he did.
He said it. He admitted that.
There is no LeBron James. There is no Kobe Bryant. There is no Michael Jordan without Doc. There is none of that without Dr. J. Now, Doc retired in 87, and I think Doc, after they won the championship in 83, I think that's when he became not so much fell off a cliff, but
that's when the decline started.
Yeah, that's when he started to slow down.
Yeah,
but
people forget because he played all those years before in the ABA, right? So
that's when he started to slow down.
I wish he would have been.
I wish I could have seen him too, Tone.
Yeah.
I really do. I was a pup. I was a baby, and my uncle, he talked about Doc so much. Doc was awesome. I mean, we're talking about a guy who played 11 years in the NBA and still scored over 30,000 points. So
I grew up around Sixers fans. And trust me, they would tell me, just like I tell stories to my kids about Kobe and Jordan, and the younger generation is going to tell their kids about LeBron. Those are that's how I heard. And I was a Magic fan, but I kept hearing, "Oh yeah, Magic is great," because I was a Laker fan. Magic's great, but you needed to see Dr. J. Ooh, and Dr. J. Ooh, and Dr. J. was in his best. Ooh, Dr. J could fly. He could walk. He could walk in the air.
Tone, we talk about a guy who
never. No one stopped saying how great Dr. J was.
So we're talking about a guy who, and this is completely left out, you know, the Sixers was in the NBA Finals 3 times in 4 years, and it was courtesy of Doc. 3 times in 4 years they was in the NBA Finals. I mean, they were able to get over the hump once they got Moses Malone, but up until that point, you know, they were one of the better. They were one of they were the class of the Eastern Conference. It was them in Boston every year. So, and Doc was the epitome of class. And I mean, I've said this in the past. Somebody asked me about what kind of trash talker was Larry Bird, and I said, to give you an idea, Dr. J was the epitome of class, and he punched Bird in the face.
And what did you say to him?
What did you say to him to make Doc punch you in the face? Because Doc was absolutely not that kind of guy. So what set Doc off? What did you say to him to make him go there? That was incredible. But you know, absolutely, Doc was that guy.
I listen. Hearing some of the stories about Bird, I'm not surprised because he would push it. So you brought up this name, and here's the center on the All 80s first team. I got him. I'm pretty sure. I got to check my list, but I'm pretty sure I've got him top 15 all time. And yet, very few people talk about how great Moses Malone was.
Well, we're talking about a guy who, in that span, from 79 to 87, we're talking about 8 years. Moses went 25 and 14. Only 2 other guys in the history could say that they've done that. That's Jabbar and Chamberlain. That's it. For that span of time, for an 8-year span, Moses went 25 and 14. Won the NBA championship with the 76ers in 83. He was the difference in what they were doing. You know, and Moses also, people talk about his ability to rebound, right? And his ability to score. Moses was an underrated defender also. Tony was a 3-time All-League defender. Moses could defend. Moses was tough as nails. Moses, I don't know if he's underrated, because when I think about the big men of all time, you know, the game did evolve. However, I do have Moses. I think I got him right there. I think I got him at 6 or 7 between him and David Robinson. But he's definitely a top 6-7 center of all time for me. No question about that. Moses was incredible.
Do you know? I don't know the answer to this, so I might have to look it up and get back to everybody, because how does he win an MVP in Houston, and then in 82, excuse me, not 92, I'm jumping ahead. In 82, move to the Sixers. Not a lot of MVPs switch teams, and obviously what got the Sixers over the hump. How does that happen?
And on top of that, they were under 500. They weren't a very good team when he won it. And for him to get moved the very next year, I understand that the Houston Rockets ended up making a trade with the 76ers. I forgot the guy who they ended up getting. I can't think about it off the top of my head and who it turned out to be. But I think that the Sixers, I think that Houston was going through a transition, and they were going to get Ralph Sampson. They got Ralph Sampson that year in 83, and then they got Olajuwon in 84. So it worked out for them. It actually did work out for them when that happened, with them ended up trading him. So ultimately, it was a good thing, but at the time, it sounded ridiculous to do that.
Right, looking back, it's ridiculous, because here's a guy who carried. Let's be honest. When we talk about carry jobs, look at that. I think it's 81 Rockets roster that was under 500, but they went to the NBA Final.
They were in the NBA Finals.
They went to the NBA Final. And if you take Moses Malone off that team, they're not.
They're Oklahoma City, Tone. That's who they are. Take Moses Malone off that team, they're Oklahoma City. They Minnesota.
He doesn't get enough credit for that. So that being said, we don't talk about what ifs very often.
No, we don't.
But because you brought up Ralph Sampson in 83, Olajuwon in 84 to the Rockets, this has been confirmed that this was on the table. I'm curious to get your take on what the NBA landscape would have looked like if this went down. So they draft Sampson. They then draft Olajuwon, because listen, he's the best player in the draft. Mm-hmm. And now they're like, well, now we got 2 centers. What do we do? Now, eventually we know what they do. They stay with it, and they have this twin tower thing. Mm-hmm. But the trade that was on the table was actually Ralph Sampson going to Portland for the number 2 pick and Clyde Drexler. And the Rockets were rumored to want to take Olajuwon 1, Jordan 2, and pair Jordan and Drexler in the backcourt with Olajuwon.
In Houston.
In Houston. I don't know if that's a confirmed, like, they were look, it didn't happen, but
Right.
it's been confirmed that, hey, yeah, that conversation had been had. Do the Rockets just go on a 10-year just dominant stretch where nobody else wins, or if they stay healthy?
Well, that's the $1 million question, because I hear a lot of people talk about. I mean, we're going off of Jordan, who he is today. So
right.
during that time, the game was ran the way it was ran, and you're talking about a guy in Olajuwon who was a franchise player. We didn't know Jordan was going to be that good. Not to mention, the Trailblazers had already had their two guard, who turned out to be really good. He turned out to be really good. So at that time, to think about getting Jordan and bringing him in and moving Drex, that dynamic may get screwed up. And
unless they're looking at the Lakers and saying, hey, if a 6'9" guy can run point, why can't Jordan run the point?
Or
Drexler, either one, yeah.
Right.
But Jordan ran point for a very short time and seemed very capable.
He was really good at it.
Yeah.
He was absolutely good.
Does Jordan become this like point guard, 6'6", ridiculous athlete point guard?
We don't.
How does each person's career change? Right. It's an interesting one because there's so many what ifs. But that's one where let
me ask you this, Tone. That trade. Let me make sure I'm understanding that correctly. So in '83.
In
'84, I'm talking about, the Trailblazers got the number 2 pick in the draft. The number 3 pick in the draft. The Trailblazers have, and they're going to trade that
number
pick.
number two.
I'm sorry, they got the number 2 pick in the draft, and they're going to trade that pick to Houston
with Clyde,
with Drexler. Drexler's going to go to Houston.
Yep.
And then the Trailblazers are going to take Jordan.
No. No. Let me go. No. So
wait,
the trade. So Houston has the first overall pick,
and they're going to go to
Olajuwon. They're then going to trade Ralph Sampson,
to
Portland for the
Sampson's
number 2
go to Portland
pick, for the number 2 pick, and Drexler. So now they would have Olajuwon, the number 2 pick, and Drexler. And with the number 2 pick, they said, we're probably taking Jordan to pair him with Drexler in the backcourt. So you'd have a rookie Olajuwon, rookie Jordan, and then whatever Drexler a couple years in. Drexler, that's like your big 3, I guess, is what we call it.
So it would have been Drexler, Jordan, and Olajuwon. Wow. I think we're talking about the Lakers a lot. I don't know. We might be talking about the Lakers a lot different than how we're talking about them now.
Mm-hmm.
We may be.
I thought that was, like I said, we don't talk what ifs a lot, but I thought that was a very.
And there's another one, Tone, that I don't know if you know about, but in '88, when before the '88 season started, the Dallas Mavericks called up Red Auerbach and said, "Hand over Kevin McHale, and we'll give you Sam Perkins."
Really? That would have changed things too.
A second year Sam Perkins in Boston with Larry Bird and Robert Parrish and that group.
Sam Perkins. You know what? Do we talk about Perkins? I don't know. Where do you rank Perkins?
Well, Perkins was he was a solid player. Perkins wasn't elite. Perkins was solid, but he was definitely ahead of his time with what he did. We're talking about a big man who could shoot the long ball.
Yeah.
Left-handed. He was really good on the block. He was good in transition. He wasn't an elite athlete, but he was a solid player.
But maybe you're listen, this is not a knock on McHale, but maybe you're right. When you got kind of Parrish down low, Perkins who can kind of space it out a little bit, and Bird, obviously. Yeah.
And a second-year player. I mean, in the all-decade team that you just mentioned, I mean, we did leave a bunch of guys out. We didn't talk about Adrian Dantley. We talking about a guy who 3 out of 4 years, he averaged 30 a game. We didn't talk about a guy like Alex English, who he's got the most 2,000-point seasons in that entire decade. Nobody in that decade scored more points than him. So, guys like
I got sidetracked the what if. So here I'll read you through the second and third team, and we can let's so we don't miss out anybody. So second team. How this is how good it was when second team is Isaiah Thomas and Sidney Moncrief.
This is the second unit. This ain't the first unit. This is the second unit.
Yeah. And then Alex English and Kevin McHale. Yep. And then your center, what's his name? Oh yeah, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was pretty good. He was pretty good. I don't know. That second team would give the first team a run for their money.
Whatever y'all looking for, we got it.
That's a great team.
That's an awesome team right there. And people don't talk nearly as much about Sidney Moncrief as they do. I mean, the Defensive Player of the Year was implemented in 82, 83. That was the first year that it was implemented. Sidney Moncrief won it. Not just that year. He won it again the next year.
Yeah, twice.
Yes.
Twice.
Won it again the next year. So people
I never hear his name. I always bring it up when we talk about perimeter guard, like defenders.
Mm-hmm.
No, and everyone's like, "Who's that?" I'm like, "Look it up." I go, "Just look it up."
Think Tony Allen, except a better scorer.
Right.
Think about Sidney Moncrief. Think Tony Allen, except a better scorer.
That's a really good comparison. Third team, not too shabby either, because there's two guys that I think are extremely underrated, and one that you're going to go, he's on the third team. So Dennis Johnson and George Gervin in the backcourt.
DJ. Mm-hmm.
And the Iceman. I love George Gervin. He can finger roll. I start to copy his finger rolls. Like, I just love it.
I just couldn't do it, Tone. I was trying to. I just could not do it. I don't know why.
You can't tell. I have really big hands, like long finger, and so it was something I could do. And I have. Listen, I'm going to tell you way too much information about me personally. So you know how your wingspan is supposed to be your height, right?
Right.
Fingertip to fingertip. Okay. So I'm 6'3".
Right.
My wingspan is it's 6'7", almost 6'8".
Right.
Right. So I have longer arms and bigger hands than I should.
Right.
So what I would do is I'd have the ball like here, and you would think, okay, that's as long as I could go, and then I would extend it, and I would always get fouled because it was like, how long is this guy's arms? It was like they called me like go gadget arms, like, and then I'd finger roll with these long ass fingers. So but I got that from him. I was like, oh yeah, if I could do that, like I understood what I could use. So to the forwards. So you talked about Adrian Dantley already. The other one, so interesting. He would have, I believe it was 4 or 5 scoring titles had it not been for Michael Jordan. He was not great, but a good defender. He was the human highlight reel, and no one talks about Dominique Wilkins. I think he might be the most underappreciated, undervalued player maybe ever, because no one ever talks about him except, he could windmill. Like, that's about it. That's all you hear.
All I'm going to say, Tone, and I mentioned this to you in the past, when he retired, there was only 7 guys in the history of the game who scored more points than him. 7. And he was not a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And Tracy McGrady was.
Yes. And Tracy McGrady
Conversation for another day, I know. Okay. Yeah. And then the center on the third team. I don't know. I think he's pretty good. Hakeem Olajuwon? Have you heard of that?
He turned out to be pretty good.
He turned out to be pretty good. Yeah. Like, just the names on this list. So when you talk about all-time greats, and then the best part is the NBA. This is NBA.com's list, of course. They say apologies to. Just think about these names: Charles Barkley,
Charles.
Robert Parrish,
Sorry,
James Worthy. I know you like this guy, Bernard King.
Yes.
Karl Malone, Terry Cummings, Drexler, Maurice Cheeks, Joe Dumars. We never talk about how good Joe Dumars was. Jack Sikma, Artis Gilmore, Ralph Sampson.
And a lot of these guys that got left off the list, they came in the mid-'80s. So like Charles came in 84, Malone came in 85.
Yeah, we'll be talking about them, and we'll be talking about them in the 90s for sure.
Those guys came in 84, 85, in the mid-'80s, and they weren't as dynamic right from the beginning, but they became that.
Yeah,
they absolutely.
Charles went to a team. Charles went to a team with some stars on it.
Right, so they were already good.
He had to play his role.
Absolutely.
Right. So I love. This is my favorite part where we fast forward to today. And listen, we're talking about my favorite division. We're talking about the Pacific Division. We're going to save my team till the end. But so I'm gonna start with. I normally start at the bottom, but let's start with a positive. Let's start with the team that finished in first in this division last year, the Phoenix Suns. And I will tell you, I'm surprised that Chris Paul re-signed in Phoenix. I thought he was going to – I honestly, I thought he was going to join LeBron in L.A. I really thought he would do like a workout, a sign-and-trade and go to L.A. because, listen, he took the young guys, he matured them, he got them to the finals, but now he's like, hey, if I go with a healthy LeBron and a healthy AD, the likelihood is I'm getting a ring. That was what I thought. But hey, that's why we watch, because they do things that we don't expect.
Right.
So he signs with Phoenix. Did they peak? Do they have another run in them? Because they got listen. I don't want to say lucky, right? It's not, but they had a good. They had good fortune throughout the playoffs, and they played. Listen, they played exceptionally.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Tone, we talking about a 36-year-old Chris Paul. I mean, how many more years he got left?
1, 2.
I'll give him 2. At this level, I'll give him 2 years tops. Now, with that being said, there's another opportunity for a payday, and he took that opportunity. Absolutely, I can't blame him for that. No question about that. He took that opportunity to get on it, because at some point, to get on a team that when I'm 39, that I may be able to play 12, 15 minutes and maybe win a championship. But my earning power isn't as good then as it is now. So I might as well take advantage of that. Now,
he also had some leverage, right? Because I think didn't he have like 40 million 1 year and 40 million left that correct. He could opt out of. So it was, hey, I'll opt in and kill your salary cap, or
we can renegotiate it.
Stretch it over 4 and give me 60 or whatever he got.
Absolutely. So we talking about a guy, and on top of that, he's still really good.
No, yeah, last year was actually impressive. We both thought he was going to break down, and guess what? He did a little bit, but he played through it, and he played hurt, and you could tell he was hurt in the end. Yeah. But he went through a whole playoff series, took them to the finals, and listen, they just got beat by a team that peaked at the right time defensively.
I think that this team, I got them 4th in the Western Conference. I think that DeAndre Ayton's going to come back better. I think this has got to be a leap year for him. Yeah. I think that, he was 16 and 11, 16 and 12 in the playoffs. He was 15 and 11 during the regular season. I think that he's got to come back better. I think he's got to come back tougher. I think Book is who he is. Over the last 4 seasons, he was 26 a game. That 26 might turn into 27 or 28, but they added some really good pieces. I think that Elfrid Payne. Yeah, that's him.
Payne. Cameron Payne. Isn't Cameron?
Not Cameron Payne. Elfrid.
No, Elfrid Payne. Yes.
He's going to push Cameron Payne for that backup point guard spot. I absolutely think that he's going to do that. Cameron Johnson's going to come back better. Something about Mikal Bridges is not sitting right with me, because I'm trying to understand what exactly it is that his role is. He's your 3, and not only is he your 3, Tone, what exactly is he bringing that's going to help us get over the top, especially in the Western Conference? Is he going to be an elite defender? Is he going to be an exceptional transition player? What exactly am I looking at when I look at him? And I know that this is his 2nd year, 3rd year. So we get to around this time, 2nd, 3rd year, where guys start becoming who we think they're going to be. Yeah. So I'm still not clear on who Mikal Bridges is. Maybe because he didn't have a great performance in the playoffs, and I think that maybe Cameron Johnson might be pushing him. Either he's going to push him to get better, or he's going to be out. But I got Phoenix. I got them 4th in the Western Conference, and I think that they will be at the top of the Pacific Division with the Lakers.
Yeah, as far as Bridges goes, look, it's okay to do a little bit of everything. But like every social media guru tells you, it's better to find your niche and kill it at that. So yeah, we're still waiting on that for him. As far as Ayton goes, I need to see, like, I hate to say it, but almost, doesn't have to be like, it could be close, but like 20, 10, and 2 blocks. Like he needs.
You've been very critical of him, Tone. You're not sold on Ayton like I am. You're not.
I'm not. I have. I have trust issues with everybody. I bring that up quite a bit. You got to do a lot to trust you. He seems like he can be broken, and I don't like that. So I want to see that meant. Look, I'm not. I feel like his mental toughness is where, and that's where I think Chris Paul helped them so much last year, and I think he comes back better this year, and that's why I think if he will put up, because I think Chris Paul will demand that he puts up kind of 20, 10, and 2. He needs to be that guy. And he has he can do it. I have no question that he can do it. he needs to want to do it, right? It's okay for someone to tell you, you can do this. You have to believe, right? So I'm with you on Phoenix. I think I don't think they're a finals kind of run again, but I think a lot of people are expecting them to drop off. And I don't think going to happen. I don't think they drop off.
Neither do I.
51 games last year. Yeah, give or take 1 or 2. I think they're in that same kind of boat. The Los Angeles Clippers have a lot of question marks. So now Kawhi's saying he's going to play, or he wants to play, he expects to play.
Mm-hmm.
They make the move and bring back, I guess, technically, Bledsoe.
Mm-hmm.
How much of an improvement is that, do you think?
Well, that's another lockdown defender that they have in the backcourt with Pat Beverly. But Pat Beverly's gone now. So Pat Beverly, they replaced Bledsoe with Beverly. So
Right.
now he's a guy who can score. And the issue that I've always had with Bledsoe, and Drew Holiday didn't help this. It was when the lights get brighter, he kind of shrinks. And Drew Holiday didn't help his case because he proved that. I mean, that was virtually the same unit. Just take Bledsoe off, put Drew Holiday in, and he basically does the same thing that you do, only except he's bigger and he's better. So I'm having a difficult time with them getting better with Bledsoe because when we get further along in the playoffs, I mean, the lights get brighter, and he's been known to shrink. I watched Terry Rozier outplay him in the playoffs. I watched him shrink in the Eastern Conference Championship against Toronto in 19. So I'm not really – I think that Bledsoe is who he is. I think that he's a solid player, but I think he's a piece. I don't think he's a big piece to what you're doing. I look at that Clipper team. I like the fact that they brought back Reggie Jackson. I think that Paul George is going to be a lot better. I'm still not sold that Leonard's going to play this year. And if he does, I don't know how effective he's going to be. And I'm very concerned, Tone, because I'm thinking about a partially torn ACL. If he ends up re-injuring that thing, we're talking about a guy who not only are we not going to have him this season, we're not going to have him next season either. So what are we looking at with this group? I don't know what DeMarcus Cousins. The Clippers are the one team in the West that I think have a lot of question marks. A lot.
Listen, I say this all the time, and it may be because I'm a Laker fan, but the Clippers going to clip. And they're not going to they're not going to do anything. I'm sorry. And you're right. If Kawhi Leonard does come back and re-injure that, his career is probably done. And we're having the conversation that, could have been. He could have been. Right? Yeah. He came in as this defender who developed we loved watching him develop. Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. He came in as a defender who then, with these massive claws, right, mm-hmm. and just clamped down on defense, and then developed in an offensive game, and then developed as a leader, and then mm-hmm. developed as one of the top kind of 3 to 5, probably top 3 players in the NBA. But then
an elite scorer.
Yeah, it was so amazing to watch him develop into this guy.
Absolutely.
And then it was just, and then once the stuff started in San Antonio, it was, But then he goes to Toronto, and it's a resurgence. And right. They played him perfectly, mm-hmm. right? Load management. Listen, I don't think any team – I know Greg Popovich probably invented load management, but Toronto mastered it that year with Kawhi. No players were complaining. Nobody had any issues. He played mm-hmm. He played 60 games.
That was it.
And the team went 17-5 without him. Right, so they didn't miss a beat,
mm-hmm.
and then you're thinking, okay, he goes to LA. People in Toronto didn't like it, but LA was like, hey, he came home,
mm-hmm.
and it just was. I don't know. It just seems like one kind of after another with him. So it's. I think you're right. A lot of question marks. I don't expect much from them. They're going to win.
I think I got them 7th, Tone. I got them in the play-in tournament.
Yeah, 6, 7. Yeah, so sounds about
mm-hmm.
right. Okay, so now we're good. Speaking of Clippers going to clip, Kings going to king, I guess. I don't know what you call it, because the Kings and the Clippers it just seems like they're there. So let me ask you this question about the Kings.
Mm-hmm.
If you had all their kind of high draft picks that they had, and you tried, do you think you could have kind of messed it up as much as they did?
Well, the first thing I'm thinking about Bagley, and Bagley, when he plays. He's actually solid, Tone. He's 15-8 when he plays. But the problem is, last season he only played 43 games. The year before that, he played 13 games. So I can't really count on this dude. I can't count on him at all. And the knock on him is not only is he injury prone, he may be a little soft. And the thing that the logic that I heard, which is, in my opinion, Tone, a fireable offense. Vlade Divac passes on Luka because him and Luka's father aren't really that cool. Vlade Divac. When I heard that,
let me ask you a question. And I'm not comparing these two players at all because I don't think he's anywhere near that level. But do you think anyone is cool with LeVar Ball?
Nobody.
Do you think Jordan is cool with LeVar Ball?
I don't think him and
But
Jordan
he
are having
still
coffee. I don't think that they hanging out.
he still drafts,
We
right? You
absolutely
still
would
got
have
to do,
figured it out.
yeah.
I don't
So you
care
don't,
about what your issue is with his father. You don't
Yeah.
pass on a guy like that.
no,
You
that's
not.
just ridiculous. And that's been the Kings, though. I look at teams like the Kings, heck, for a long time, the Knicks.
Mhm.
And listen, I know we talk sports, but I sit there thinking, listen, I give respect where respect is due. I see GMs, I give them their respect, coaches, players, and I say, look, those are things I cannot do. But sometimes I look at them and go, actually, I think I could do a better job. And I think I could
Yes.
100% do a better job with the Kings.
Plenty of times, Tone, you've seen general managers do things and you're thinking to yourself, what were you thinking there? Like, because a lot of the stuff is logic. A lot of the stuff is something that's simple, where you see a guy and you can tell how he fits into your dynamic. You have already interviewed him. You know if he's soft. When you're trading for a guy, you know what the word is on this guy. So the Kings actually have some good players. The problem is that they haven't been able to put it together. So I'm digging Fox and Halliburton in the backcourt. I do not like my guy Davion Mitchell in Sacramento. I don't. And the reason why I don't like him there is because Davion Mitchell is a guy who I think should be playing early. He's not going to play early in Sacramento. If he would have been somewhere like maybe Minnesota or somewhere like that where Russell could have gotten moved to the 2, I think that would have been great for him because he would play right from the beginning. And I'm afraid that they're going to screw him up there. And I think Fox is wasting away up there. Tony's 25-7, and we don't even talk about him. We don't even talk about him at all. I think they got a potential all-league defender up there in Rashawn Holmes, and we don't talk about him. Yeah. So that team, I think in terms of a talent standpoint, I think they got the goods. And is Walton a good coach?
I don't think so.
Well,
I don't think so.
And that's the other thing. I mean, because he looked good with the Warriors, but that was one of those.
Everyone could have looked good with the Warriors.
That was my point, Tony. That sounds like me giving you the keys to the Ferrari. Just don't crash it. That's all that sounded like to me. So I think that the Kings, I wouldn't be surprised if they were right on the outside of the play-in tournament. But in terms of the Pacific Division, I do have them at the bottom of it.
Yeah. I'm, as you can tell, I haven't said one good thing. I'm historically just down on the Kings since Vladdy was playing there. With C. Webb and Doug Christie and Jay Will, I think that's it. All right, so this one's an interesting team. This one I think has all the potential to have. I feel like we're going to reminisce about the Golden State Warriors if, as reported, Klay comes back and he's Klay. Mm-hmm. You're going to have Steph, Klay, and Draymond. Mm-hmm. A little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little bit slower. Mm-hmm. You got Andrew Wiggins, who's refusing to take a vaccine, so he's either going to get traded, if anyone will take him. I know Stephen A. Smith, just trade him. Mm-hmm. You need a partner. You can't just trade people. Someone has to take them.
Can't just dump them.
So they're going to trade Wiggins, I'm assuming, or they're just going to play him 41 road games. I don't know how that's going to work. Wiseman, if he takes a step, like this team could be. This team is boom. This might be the epitome of boom or bust, right?
Right. And I look at this team, Tone, and I think that Wiseman's going to come back better. And why do I think that? I think that the leadership of Draymond helped him out tremendously. I mean, he had his rookie mistakes, and he had his freshman mistakes. Absolutely. I can appreciate that. But I think he's going to come back a lot better. I think he's going to come back a better rebounder. I think he's going to come back smarter as a basketball player. And I think he's going to help them tremendously. Now, when I look at the Wiggins aspect, well, we got a guy in Kuminga who's going to play behind Wiggins, and I think that he's going to help tremendously. And I don't know if he's Wiggins good because that's 18 a game that's going to be out the lineup if he's not available. So I don't know if Wiggins can – I don't know if Kuminga can, supplement that. But I do think that he's going to help them out tremendously. Him and Moody, those are big-time draft picks for them. However, Tone, I do have some new information, and, with new information – opinions change. So they talking about Klay not coming back till January. So that's going to be a problem. So it's not like we get Dre. We get Klay in training camp, and he's here from day one. That's almost half the season he's going to miss. So, I
And
mean,
that's assuming there's no other setbacks.
right. That's assuming that there's no other setbacks. So now, I mean, I had the Warriors at 5 in the West. I had them as a top 5 team in the West. Well, now, if we're going to lose Clay for almost half the season, they may be in the play-in tournament again.
I think that's best case scenario in the play-in
They may be in the play-in
again.
tournament again.
And to Wiggins for a second, this is the quietest 18 points that anyone has ever averaged in the NBA. When you say it, I look it up. I'm like, really? He averaged, because I watch the games, and occasionally he does something. The other thing I noticed about him that this is what bothered me, and goes back to before obviously he was on the Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
In 90% of cases, 90, okay, you're a top 5 draft pick who plays right after year 3. Okay, so you've made it past that 3-year hump.
Mm-hmm.
How many of them have you seen physically look skinnier and more frail than when they came into the league?
Not many. I mean, in fact, when you get to that point, you start to fill out.
Yeah.
It's actually the opposite.
He looked like he was more his arms looked bigger and more defined. And people are like, why am I talking about this? Well, it's important because if you look at, like, I know this is a freak of nature, but if you look at Giannis, heck, you look at LeBron, right? You look at Jordan, you look at any of the greats, okay? And listen, Wiggins, I know Wiggins doesn't belong in that conversation, but listen, he was a first overall pick that people thought was going to be in that conversation. Mm-hmm. So you see those guys and you see, hey, the NBA's tough. There's men in this league. And Giannis got big. LeBron got big. Jordan got not necessarily big. Jordan got bigger, but you could definitely see stronger.
Absolutely.
Wiggins looked like he's gone backwards. And that's what concerns me, because it makes – now, I understand because of the vaccine thing, because he said it was religious reason. So I don't know if it's his religion where he has certain eating habits. Mm-hmm. But when I see it without knowing that information, so if I'm wrong and it's because of that, then I apologize. If it's not, it's like, well, is he really dedicated, right? Like, is he in the gym? Is he working? I see that he works on his game, kind of. It's gotten better. But I haven't seen any big leaps. I've seen him just get better as he's gotten more knowledge. But I would have expected him to kind of come in and get bigger, get stronger, right? Be more consistent with his defense, because he can play defense when he wants to.
Well, Tone, let me ask you this: we're in year 8 with Wiggins now. What do you expect from him?
Nothing. Nothing.
That's what I'm saying. Because by this time, you are who you are.
Oh yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Is I'm disappointed, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Is in year 8 that I haven't seen a body transformation. I've seen kind of a step backwards. I haven't seen a game transformation. I've seen it pretty level.
Because I'm a firm believer in that, Tone. When you got a guy who is the number 1 overall pick in the draft, I'm not saying he's a bust, because he did average 20 a game.
Yeah,
for his career. So I'm not saying he's a bust. However, I would have liked to have seen a first. I would like to have seen an all-league defender. I'd like to have seen an all-NBA performer. I'd like to have seen an all-star just once in the last 8 years. I'd like to have seen that, and I haven't seen that.
I feel on the Warriors. I feel like on the Warriors, he's Harrison Barnes. I get he's better. But for a first overall pick, he's not that much better.
Yeah.
And that's why I say I think there's lost potential. He's from around where I'm from. I really wanted him to do well, right? Like Vaughn, where he's from, is 10 minutes away from me. Maybe that's why too. I wanted him to be a perennial all-star.
Tone, we could kill that Canadian soft thing, because Tristan Thompson is not soft.
No,
Jamal Murray is not soft. Let's dead that. He's from Canada. He might be like, no. Let's kill that. Because Canadians
we live in igloos and chop down tree with our hands. What are you talking about soft?
That's not going on up there, man. These dudes are not soft. Let's get to the bottom of that right now.
Come call me soft. All right, so there's another team. I forgot. There's one more. Do we have time? Let's make time.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Let's make time, because this team's going to win not only the Pacific Division, they're going to be the number 1 seed in the West, and they're taking the title. And if they don't, like my old friend Ricky Ricardo used to say, Lucy, you got some explaining to do. Because you bring in Russell Westbrook on top of a healthy, should be rested, because he got knocked out in the first round for the first time in his career, other than the first 2 years where he didn't make the playoffs. So yes, don't correct. Everyone's going to correct me and say, the first 2 years. Okay. So first I'm getting knocked out in the first round. You got a healthy, hopefully rested LeBron. You should have a healthy, and hopefully he stays healthy, AD.
Lighter too, by the way, Tone. Don't leave that out. He dropped some weight this summer too.
Who, LeBron or AD?
Yes, he did. James dropped some weight this summer. Yes,
that's a good thing. I haven't seen him. Healthy, rested AD. You bring in Russell Westbrook. THT is back and with another year under his belt because I think he's going to be maybe a starter too. You bring in Monk. I'm going to forget somebody. You bring in
None.
You
Wayne
bring
Ellington.
in Wayne Ellington, Dwight Howard, Rajon
Yes,
Rondo.
sir.
There's
Carmelo.
another big. Carmelo. Oh my God. How would we forget about Carmelo? There's one more big I'm forgetting.
Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard replaced Drummond.
No, but there's one. Did someone else too? Anyways, there's one more big that they just brought in. DeAndre Jordan. DeAndre Jordan. So you bring in basically the 2012 All-Star team. The expectations are high. Mm-hmm. If you don't win a title, it's title or bust. Let's be honest. So what would go wrong quickly? Like if there's one thing, what would go wrong that just derails it, and what needs to go right?
Injuries are the only thing that can derail this thing. Injuries. And I think that with the long ball shooters that you have, your offense is going to be so spread out, and that's going to benefit Russ incredibly. Okay. Because now Russ doesn't have to do much in terms of scoring. He can be the distributor that he is, and it's not going to take a lot for Russ to have to do that. This guy's open, get him the ball. That's it. Not to mention, I've heard that Anthony Davis and James have both made it clear that they will play the 4 and the 5, which is going to be a nightmare for defenses where if you got James playing the 4 and we get into pick and roll action with James and Russell Westbrook and you get Russ switched onto a 4, he can go after that guy, right? And if you get James switched onto a 1, he can go after him. So that's going to be a nightmare. However, the key to this thing, Tone, and I've said this I think I've said this to you before, this whole thing is rested on one person and one person only, and that's Anthony Davis. If Anthony Davis can stay healthy, he is the difference between them winning and losing the NBA championship.
I get it that not all these players are what they once were.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta tell you this. Here's the list of active players who have gone to the free throw line the most. Okay? You ready? Number 1, LeBron James.
Yeah.
A Laker. Number 2, Dwight Howard. A Laker. Number 3, James Harden. A Net. Number 4, Carmelo Anthony. A Laker.
A Laker.
Number 5, Russell Westbrook. A Laker. You might have no one left on the bench. You might have everybody just if they can do what they've done historically in their careers, which is get to the line. Mm-hmm. And like you just said, if him and James do go run a pick and roll, and Russell Westbrook has a 4 guarding him, it's a foul. Like that's all you can do. He's going to blow by them and dunk, or it's going to be a foul. So if these guys everyone's going to be in foul trouble because LeBron's going to get the call. I didn't even mention AD. I'm sure AD's going to do. But LeBron's going to get the calls. Westbrook's going to get the calls. Carmelo's earned the right to get the calls. Dwight Howard, they might foul him intentionally. Mm-hmm. So it's just interesting. It's an interesting dynamic because when I saw that, I went, "Oh, that's interesting." Mm-hmm. We might be watching a whole bunch of free throws. That's not fun basketball, but so obviously injuries would derail them.
Yes.
To go right, you think healthy, it's a wrap.
I think healthy, they win the Western Conference Championship. And I love Utah, right? I love what Denver's doing. I'm digging Phoenix. I'm digging Dallas. I'm digging these other teams. But as long
Denver,
as the Lakers...
we didn't talk about... Well, we'll talk about Denver when we do that division.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'm digging all of those teams. But the only thing that can derail this Laker team is if they don't... Health is the benefactor here. I mean, the health is the biggest factor here. If these guys can stay healthy, and not just stay healthy the whole season, Tone, if they can stay healthy at the right time, let's say going maybe a month before the playoffs start, and then they can stay healthy going into the playoffs, I think that they're absolutely going to win the NBA championship. No doubt about it.
We have time for one more thing, and it's important because training camp started, teams started getting together. Mm-hmm. So I want, from kind of what you saw in kind of the first day of the clips that we see rolling out, anything you saw that was surprising, interesting, most exciting?
Mhm.
What did you get from kind of that media day that you're looking, kind of got your juices flowing for the season?
Milwaukee, I'm really interested. I'm because they look like Milwaukee looks like they're ready to get back after it. I mean, they had the whole off season, and we're going to get back to an 82 game season. I think Brooklyn, watching them in the media day, I think that they're the most eager because of the injuries. But they got a lot of issues, with Irv not being there, and he can be the difference in what they're doing. He can in the words of Coach Krzyzewski, he could either heat the building or he could burn the building down. So
Very
that's
true.
that's the difference with Irv. But Milwaukee is a team that I saw that I was thinking to myself, they look like they're definitely ready to put on a show and to defend what they have. Joel Embiid didn't really look that comfortable talking about Ben Simmons. He didn't, and Doc Rivers didn't. That's a funky dynamic in Philadelphia, Tone, and it's something
they need to do. Yeah, they need to do something there.
It needs to get resolved really quickly, man, because it's going to spill. If it spills into the season, then it's going to be worse.
No, and listen, I get it that their asking price was too high, and they're going to have to come down from it. Look, it's partly their own fault for the things that they said about Ben Simmons, and now that Ben Simmons has publicly said, "I'm not playing there," they need to do something. And listen, I actually think Kyrie for Ben Simmons actually is a good trade for both teams. They won't do it.
No, they won't.
It actually makes sense. That being said, listen, I get it, what people believe on COVID, but you want to play in the NBA, you want to be a good teammate, go get your shots and go play. I'm sorry.
It's a job requirement, man. That's all I'm asking. I'm not saying that you have to do it. And I'm all for freedom of speech and standing up for what you believe in. I can appreciate that. I've seen essential workers get fired because of this.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Just listen. Because otherwise, I get it. Anyways, I don't want to get in that conversation, but unless you want to play, just go do it and play. That being said, there's two other teams who made a trade that I wanted, because you talked about all the other ones I was going to bring up, so I'm not going to reiterate on those guys. I saw something in Miami that I thought was interesting. Now, I knew that Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler were friends. I knew that already. However, when I saw the two of them and Bam, they were kind of posing, pretending to be like Charlie's Angels. And Kyle Lowry was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "What? This is what they do." He's like, we're not Charlie's Angels. He goes, "We're black." And just the laughter and the camaraderie. Because people, I don't think put enough credit into that chemistry.
Oh, that's huge.
And one thing I can tell you watching the Raptors with Kyle Lowry and DeMar, and then Kyle Lowry and Kawhi, them getting along and kind of having each other's back affected the rest of the team.
Yes.
And so I have question marks about Miami, but seeing stuff like that they've already brought in Bam into their kind of circle of friends and transitioned, I think is important.
Yep.
And I'm only bringing this part up because it was something we talked about a couple of days ago, and it was something that I talked about a month ago, combined into one. So Kyle Lowry is wearing the number 7. He called Dragic and said, "Hey, is this cool?" He asked his okay. No, he didn't have to, but he did, which I thought was nice. And Dragic said, "Yeah, 100%. You're an NBA champion. You're an all-time great. Absolutely wear the number 7." Dragic, on the other hand, comes to Toronto. It does not look like he's getting moved. He has backpedaled from his "I didn't want to be here" kind of saying, "Listen, you misunderstood. I spent time with the team now. I've seen the city. I've been around the city. It's a great city." And he's backpedaled. But the interesting thing is, they asked him, "Well, how come you're not wearing number 7 in Toronto?" And he said, "I don't think it was right because I think number 7 is going to be in their rafters one day, so I don't want to wear the number." Which is interesting because I think Toronto does retire Kyle Lowry's number 7.
I do.
He's a very integral part in what they did over the last decade.
Yep.
That being said, he said, "Well, but I'm going to take the number 1." Now, I know he didn't play here that long and he didn't do too much, but that was Tracy McGrady, first ballot Hall of Famer, Tracy McGrady's number in Toronto. So it doesn't seem to me like that number is going to the Raptors, nor should it. But it brings up, it reminded me of our conversation about, listen, whether you agree or disagree with McGrady being a first ballot Hall of Famer or being a Hall of Famer, period, which I disagree with. Interesting first ballot Hall of Famer, but yeah, his number. Yeah, I'll take his number instead of Kyle Lowry. So
yes.
But, those are two things in the East that I saw that was, I think Miami's going to be, I had them lower, but I'm starting to see some chemistry that is going to make me bump them up a bit. And listen, I'm not just saying this because I'm here. I think Toronto might be a dark horse play-in game. So I'm talking top 10.
I got them. I got Toronto right on the cusp of the play-in tournament. I do. I have them right there.
They've got some, like Fred VanVleet said something yesterday that just kind of like Dragic. Dragic basically said, "Look, I'm going to play," which I think is fantastic. Fred VanVleet said this, and I think it's going to be my new mantra. He said, "Every day, men do things that people told them was impossible."
There you go.
That's a pretty good. I just was like, yeah. Yes, people every day people do stuff that people people said they couldn't do. People said you couldn't run a 4-minute mile until someone did it.
Somebody did it.
And now everybody does it.
And the thing too, Tone, is, and I said this to you in the past, I keep getting a lot of people that were on me about Toronto, talk about Toronto. And I was trying to figure out, why do everybody want to talk about Toronto? They didn't make the playoffs. And then I started doing some research, and I started doing some homework, and I was looking at the talent that they have. And, Siakam did average 29 and 8 after the All-Star break.
In 72, and don't forget, they played 72 road games.
72 of them.
Don't underestimate that. People say, but Tampa. No, they were getting booed. They were getting booed in Tampa.
Right. They ain't even from there, and they're getting booed there. So I'm not completely out on Toronto. I'm not. I'm definitely paying more attention to them.
Look, they're not running for a championship. They're not in the championship conversation, but they're going to be in the play-in playoff talk. And I think people who are thinking they're going to be dead last, no, I think they're going to surprise some people because they're still really well coached.
Yeah, they're going to be a lot better.
I think people forget. I get it. You lose Lowry. Kawhi leaves a few years earlier. But they still have VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam. Now they bring in Scotty Barnes. I don't know how that's going to work with all those guys because a lot of them are very similar.
Boucher looks like he's going to be a really good defender.
Yeah, Matt Flynn is a really good shooter. They've got a bunch of pieces. Is his name Precious that they also got from that Miami trade?
From Akua from South Carolina. Yes.
So there's pieces there. So it should be interesting. So that I wanted to bring it up because now that we're getting into the season, we're going to get more of these sound bites. We're going to get more of these things. And I thought it'd be important. So let's go Lakers. Don't forget to check us out on Friday for the NFL edition, which is going to be packed full of stuff. I'm going to tell you why you should be afraid of betting on the Broncos. So that's going to be Friday on the NFL edition. Until next week.
Take it light. Take it.